there, spooky friends. This is Adam from the Scarish Podcast here with a, I guess, special bulletin for COVID-19. Not really. So, as most of you know who have watched the show before or listened to the show before, we tend to cover scary, paranormal, or weird, bizarre topics, and we have in the past done topics similar to COVID-19. We've done the Black Plague, we've done Spanish flu, and those are pandemics that have happened in the past, and we wanted to make sure that if we did anything for COVID-19, we didn't have it in the same light as that, because it's, just generally not the same thing, but we wanted to make sure we were bringing you folks some information because we've had a lot of requests, because this is kind of a scary thing going on right now, and we want to make sure that we are able to tell you what's happening from our perspective, and I wanted to really give you some general information about COVID-19 because unfortunately there's this notion, at least within our country, that if you have something this serious, that if you're going to be getting your information, it also needs to be included with it a package of someone's personal opinion or political bias, and that sucks because a lot of us really want to know what's going on right now and how things are going to be handled, what we can do, and things like that. And I don't think anyone should have to sift through someone else's bullshit to get that. So I've gone ahead and done that for you. I've read countless articles, so this video did take a lot longer to make than I had intended. But that is okay because I want to have as much actual information as possible to give to you wonderful folks. I'm also going to go ahead and list the places that I found my information in the section below. So if you would like to see any of my sources, feel free to do that. Fantastic. That said, I am going to watch the comments very, very carefully because as happens when people are bored and there's not a lot to do, there have been quite a few trolls running around on the internet, and I get it when you're bored. Sometimes it's fun to play practical jokes, but I will be deleting comments that might not be for the best interest of everyone because there is always very healthy, very respectful conversation within the Spooky Friends group, and I want to make sure that that is protected, especially for a video like this. So let's just jump right into the things that I'm going to be covering in this video. So the first thing that I want to do is clear up some common misconceptions going on about coronavirus and or COVID-19. And one of the main ones I want to deal with is this idea that The Simpsons somehow predicted the coronavirus. It's honestly kind of funny that I'm talking about this again because as of, I think, 2 or 3 episodes, episode 117, my main topic for Scary-ish was the Simpsons prophecies, where I went through the vast list of Simpsons conspiracy theories that state that they have predicted something from the past and debunked nearly all of them. There are a few that are kind of creepy, and I openly admit that. Feel free to go listen to the episode if you'd like to hear those. However, for this one in particular, it is, as most are, total horseshit. So, and I mean that with all respect to people who thought it was real, but realistically kind of should have known better. So I want to kind of separate the fact from the fiction here and let you know exactly why this is just a meme that people are passing around because it's fun to do. The basics of this is that the term coronavirus has existed since 1965 when the corona-style virus was discovered. And coronavirus actually has multiple strains. It has for a very long time. In fact, I believe there's 4 common variations that human beings tend to get, along with now 3 uncommon variations that human beings will get. One of them is SARS, one of them is also known as MERS, and the last one is the one that we now know as COVID-19. So COVID-19 is the actual name of what is afflicting folks right now, not coronavirus. It's kind of the whole rectangle is a square is a rectangle, one's bigger than the other one, but COVID-19 specifically means that. So no, The Simpsons didn't predict that coronavirus would eventually spread. It was spreading and has been for a very long time because one of the most common things we refer to the coronavirus as is the common cold, which has been around a lot longer since we put a name to it. So that one, right off the bat, debunked, and it's just easier to call this entire thing COVID-19, which is how I'm going to refer to it for the rest of this. You know what's funny is that anyone who's an actual Simpsons fan would kind of remember, I particularly remember this episode because everyone gets sick from the common cold except for Marge. She's taking care of everyone and she accidentally shoplifts from the Quickie Mart, so she gets sent to jail, and then everyone has to deal with life without Marge for 30 days, and that's the entire point of the episode. The reason that they get sick is because something comes from overseas and gets everyone sick, which is why people are like, well, they kind of did predict that it would come from China. And I just want to point out that the Simpsons episode, which I'm pretty sure is like episode 23 of season 4, if I'm not mistaken, the cold or whatever it is referred to as like the Osaka flu or the Osaka cold, which means it came from Japan, which means it didn't come from China, which are 2 completely different places with 2 completely different cultures and languages. So if you're saying, oh, it predicted it because you saw a meme that has an Asian persuasion person in the meme, then you know what? That just shows that you're really not paying attention to the finer details and probably shouldn't be claiming prophecy. I would also highly encourage anyone who is under quarantine to just do some basic research on the internet. It is not that difficult. Just do some Googling, find some actual like scientific research, some scientific journals where you can learn more about this stuff. Because realistically right now, the only way people are getting their information is through meme, news media, or word of mouth. And I feel like for folks that are under quarantine, this is something that would be really easy for you to do. That said, I realize that the best way to spread some information is to probably just put like 1 or 2 factoids on Pornhub's homepage. But I don't have control over that, so I am just recommending that maybe take a break, open up a new tab that's not incognito, and just do some research for yourself so that way you don't, have to die from exhaustion. So there's really only 2 things I want to cover for this video, and one is what COVID-19 actually is and where things are at right now. So just some examples of what's actually going on, ways you can prevent it, and things that actually are not going to help if you try and do them. And we'll just try and go through this step by step and be rational about this whole thing, which I think is definitely needed right now. So a few of the things I keep hearing about COVID-19 that I want to directly address is the one, COVID-19 is really not that big of a deal. 2, COVID-19 is just like the flu. And 3, the flu has killed a lot more people than COVID-19. And those are 3 things that I think we can talk about directly, and I'm going to talk about them in the reverse order. And first and foremost, I'd like to point out that it's kind of crazy to compare COVID-19 to literally anything else right now, especially other outbreaks that have ever happened, because we're in the middle of it happening right now. So if you're going to take numbers from something that has happened and has been finished and compare them to something that's currently underway and we don't know what stage we're at, it's kind of like taking a baseball player who's in their rookie year and comparing them to Babe Ruth. It's just as foolish to say something like, well, Babe Ruth had like way more home runs when this person's in their first year, as it is to say like, well, this person's going to be the greatest baseball player ever, or this person is the greatest baseball player ever. Those are 2 extremes, and we kind of do that for everything in the world. And like everything else in the world, the truth exists somewhere in the middle, which is where the facts actually are. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to use the flu because it seems to be the most common thing people compare this to. So the idea that the flu has killed more people than COVID-19 actually is indeed true. As of February 28th, the Center for Disease Control has stated that there are 32 million people this flu season that have been affected by the flu, and in addition to that, 18,000 of those folks have passed away, which is a higher total than COVID-19. As of today, the day I'm recording this video, which is March 20th, 2020, COVID-19 has killed, and let me get this number correct here, 11,194 people, apparently by noon, as of today. So yeah, the flu has definitely killed more people in its season than COVID-19 has this year. That said, there are some massive differences between the 2, and I want to go over those so everyone understands that just because you can compare 2 numbers doesn't tell the actual story of what's going on. So as far as the flu goes, I feel like everyone, at least that has had experiences like me, understands within the United States how easy it is to catch the flu. I've worked in offices for a larger portion of my adult life, and if someone walks into the office and has the flu, you can almost be guaranteed not only are they going to get someone else sick, but it's going to spread through the office like wildfire within like 1 or 2 weeks. I've always called it the office plague because sooner or later, everyone's going to be affected by it. And that's just the flu that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like we've always dealt with that. In the United States, you are offered free flu shots. And even then people are like, you know what? I really don't get sick that often. I'm not going to take it. Or some people routinely take their flu shots every single year. And despite that, we still have numbers like I just mentioned of 32 million people worldwide catching the flu and 18,000 dying. So as far as infectiousness of the flu, it is something we've all just come to accept like, yeah, I run the risk of getting it. I understand that this could happen, but hey, I trust my immune system even though I don't trust other people to not spread it to me or expose me to it. And that's where things start to take a little bit of a turn when we talk about COVID-19. So the idea of it's just the same as the flu doesn't really hold water because they are 2 very different things despite having similar symptoms. So as far as the infection rate that we have talked about to this point where we all just know it's going to happen, the flu has an infection rate, and this is rated by something called the basic reproduction number, which you'll see as RO, which is really R0, and that's how they rate things for how fast or quickly they can spread. It has an infection rate of 1.3, which is to say that if you have one person that has the flu, you can expect 1.3 other people to get it. I know 0.3 doesn't really make sense, but when you're looking at an average of folks and how fast it's going to spread, I mean, that's a lot. If you get one person with the flu, they're going to give it to one person and a third of another person, and that sucks. When it comes to COVID-19, that reproduction number is actually 2.28, which is almost a full one higher, which means for every one person that gets COVID-19, 2.28 additional people are going to get it. So that is something significantly higher than the flu, which we already know spreads like wildfire, especially if you're in an office or around children, because adults in an office and children are petri dishes of filth and disease, despite the fact that we love most of them, and they spread things. And that is where things get a little dicey here. That infection rate is based off of the median of 95% of the studies that have been done, stating that this is around the range that this number floats. So the minimum that they have studied it to be is 2.03, and the maximum, I believe, is 2.53, which means that it's still above 2, even if you're taking best case scenario for how infectious this is, which is still substantially higher than the flu. Now, anyone who's ever played the game Plague Inc., which is very fun, although very morbid to play right now, understands that making a disease very deadly won't win the game. What wins that game is if you make your disease very infectious, because the faster it spreads, the more people get infected. And that is what we're really looking at with COVID-19. Now, something that's not taken into consideration in a game like Plague Inc. is incubation time, which is to say the time from when you're exposed to the time to when you develop symptoms. For the flu, that could be anywhere between 1 and 4 days. If you're exposed to someone with the flu, typically within that same week, you're going to start showing symptoms. And for a lot of folks, it does happen a lot sooner. I know when I'm around someone who has the flu, I know if I don't have it within a day, I'm probably not going to get it. And that's just me. That's just how I've always been. But it's something else when you're talking about COVID-19, because the incubation period for that is 1 to 14 days, which means you could have been exposed, you could have the disease active in your system where you're about to develop symptoms for up to 2 weeks while you're still going about your business thinking you're fine. And despite the fact that the flu and COVID-19 are at their most infectious, when your symptoms are active, you can still give it to someone else despite the fact that you're asymptomatic and don't even know you have it. It is not as likely for that to happen, but when we're talking about something that is this infectious, that is scary. Think about everything you've done for the last 2 weeks, and then think about how many people you've seen, and then imagine tomorrow you're told you have COVID-19. How many people you're going to have to call and let them know, yo, I have COVID-19. Sorry for that. You might have it too. You should probably quarantine for 14 days just to see if you're going to develop symptoms. And the worst part about that is there are folks out there at the 14-day mark who do develop symptoms that are not severe. And we're going to get into severity here in a bit, but imagine that you catch this, you have a bit of a cold, a sniffle, some flu-like symptoms, but it's not that bad. You're on the lower end of it, and you either don't go to the doctor or you go to the doctor and you don't get a test because it's not severe, your life is not threatened, and we don't have enough tests. When that happens, you're going to keep going about your daily business and spreading it when you're at your most infectious. And that is very similar to the flu. Imagine when you have the flu, what you do. You typically will call your boss, let them know that you're not coming into work, and you quarantine yourself at home. You probably watch The Price is Right if you're up in time. You play some video games, or you sleep most of the day. Who knows what your ritual is? That one is mine. There are some folks out there who just go to work anyways, even though they have the flu, which is a bad idea for many reasons, but 2 I would like to point out. 1 is that you're at your most infectious and you're almost certainly going to get someone else sick. And 2 is that if you're at work, you're probably going to have to throw up in a public toilet, which is really fucking gross. You don't know what asses have already been there, and I don't want my face anywhere near that shit. So why would you go to work if you have the flu? Exactly the same reason why would you go to work if you had COVID-19? The shorter answer is you wouldn't and you shouldn't. But if you don't know, you might just be there and spreading it without even knowing. And the idea that you could give this to someone else who could be at higher risk is the key to this entire thing. It is why things are being taken as seriously and are being handled as severely as they are. I mean, it's March 20th right now when I'm making this video, which means as of today, California, the entire state, and all 40 million residents are on lockdown and are told to be staying in their homes. I can tell you Nevada on Tuesday this week, while we were doing our live show, our governor had a press conference where all non-essential businesses were to close, and any restaurants that did not offer carry-out service were to close as well. This is substantial. Aside from that, there are a lot of places that are listed as essential that are going through reductions in workforce. Whether or not you're being furloughed, or whether or not you're being laid off, or your positions are being eliminated, it is affecting things on a global basis. And this is one of the things that needs to be considered when people are just flippantly saying that COVID-19 is not a big deal. It might not have affected you yet, but it has affected quite a few people, including myself and Robin. So it's something that I definitely think needs to be handled with care. And I understand having humor in any situation to make it better, but general guideline, don't be a dick. One of the complaints I'm hearing about this most frequently in my social media is people are upset that they're being quarantined because things really aren't that bad. And they're looking at that from the perspective of, well, the death toll is just not that high. The entire idea behind having people on lockdown and quarantine is to prevent the death toll from being that high. And if you think people are doing these things flippantly, you really need to consider how much they are personally affected by making the decision, not to mention the ripple effect that's happening to everyone else affected by that decision. Sometimes it's better for businesses to be affected than for people to die. And that segues into one of the last parts of this video, and honestly, probably the scariest part. And it's a really good example of why comparing COVID-19 to the flu is really like comparing apples to oranges. First of all, for individuals who contract the flu, the average percentage of folks who wind up in the hospital for having the flu is around 2% of the cases. So for each 100 cases of the flu, two folks are going to go to the hospital because of their symptoms. For COVID-19, for each 100 folks that get COVID-19, 19 of them wind up in the hospital. It's over 9 times more. That means that the symptoms, while being similar, are much more severe, and for the folks that it is severe, are at risk of dying. This isn't something that we've seen before. It's a brand new thing, and no one has antibodies to it, and the antibodies we have for the things that are similar simply just don't work. And you will need to be hospitalized if you're in that 19%, and you'll need medical attention to assist you in recovering. Now, that's the numbers that I've been hearing from the beginning. Roughly around 80% of folks are going to contract this, but are not going to develop severe symptoms where they need to be hospitalized, while the other 20% will need hospitalization due to their symptoms. And if you're looking at this on a scale of like, not bad at all, maybe you don't even know that you have it, to you have the worst symptoms possible, I think of this on a scale of Buffalo Wild Wings like flavor sauces. Like, most people are going to float between like sweet barbecue and like Caribbean jerk. You know, if you're looking at the level of hotness, I think on average people's symptoms, if you're comparing it to wing sauce, would be like Parmesan garlicky, which isn't bad, and everyone can order that as a basic thing, but you're not too worried about it scalding the top of your mouth. The problem is the other 20% are going to deal with stuff from hot ranging all the way up to blazing, and that's where the joke kind of ends comparing things to sauces, because for anyone in that 20%, things are very, very risky. So keeping with this comparison with the flu, the mortality rate, the people who catch this, on average, 0.1% of them will die from the flu, which is a very, very low number. Like I said already, 32 million people have contracted the flu this flu season, and 18,000 have died. On a year-to-year basis, it averages to around 0.1% of folks who catch the flu will pass away. When it comes to COVID-19, the range for the percentage of mortality is between 1% and 3.4%, which is substantially, substantially higher. It is frightening how much higher that number is. There has been a lot made of this, and I don't want any political discussion whatsoever, which is why I've extrapolated as much of it as possible. But the 3.4% number came from the director of the World Health Organization, and I'm going to try and get his name right. Here I go. General Tedros Ghebreyesus, which I'm pretty sure I said correctly, stated on March 11th, which is 9 days ago, that the global mortality rate for COVID-19 is 3.4%. Some world leaders don't exactly agree with that number, and if you want to look into what they have said, I highly encourage you to do so if that is the thing that you want to do. And that's why I'm giving you the range, because I've seen it as low as 1, and I've seen it as high as 3.4%, and the 3.4% is a scary number because of who it came from. Now, like I mentioned, 80% of folks that get this are not going to have severe symptoms, and some of them might not even get that symptomatic. In fact, with the limited amount of tests that we actually have in the United States, most folks that don't have severe symptoms may not even know that they have it. I personally know 3 people who have been hospitalized and quarantined because they suspected they have it with severe symptoms, and they were told that they would not be tested because of the lack of tests. For the folks who don't wind up in the hospital because their symptoms aren't that bad or they just merely didn't go, you can still give it to someone who is a much higher risk of having severe symptoms and possibly dying from it. And with a number of 1 to 3.4%, I don't think anyone's comfortable with those odds with yourself, your family, or your friends being exposed to someone who might be exposing them based out of ignorance or carelessness. And that is a fucking dick move. The individuals most at risk are folks over 60 years old. And if you look at that number and say, hey, I'm nowhere near that, that doesn't really matter. I can tell you that my mother lives with us. Most of everyone that listens to this show knows that. They give shout outs to Spooky Mom all the time in the emails we get. Spooky Mom is 60 plus. I'll go with that. 60 plus. And she is one of the high risk folks. And the higher you get in age, the higher of risk you are. And the fact that you could not even see someone but pass it to them, who can then pass it to someone who is high risk, is exactly why this is being taken so incredibly seriously. Because when you combine the infection rate and you combine the mortality rate, the numbers start to get a bit scary. And even if you take the low end of the projections, it is still a number that is absolutely unacceptable and unfathomable to allow that many people to die without taking preventative measures, which is exactly what is happening worldwide right now. So we're going to go over those numbers, and they are by far the scariest part of this video, but then we're going to go over ways that we can prevent this from happening, and most of them, if not all of them, are incredibly easy things to do. We just have to be diligent about it. That said, let's take a look at some of these numbers. The alarm bells really started sounding when people who study the epidemiology of the way these things spread and the infectiousness of diseases combined with the CDC, the WHO, and various other organizations around the world began to project how many folks on the planet worldwide, as far as looking at the human race, were most likely going to contract COVID-19 before this thing comes to an end. The numbers are as low as 20%, which means that 20% of the human race is at risk and possibly likely based off of the current conditions to contract COVID-19. The number that I've heard at the higher end of that is 60%. And 60% means that more than half the world will be infected by COVID-19 at some point during its life cycle. I've heard numbers even higher than 60%, but because I have tried to validate everything with at least 3 sources, I don't feel comfortable sharing those numbers. So we'll say 20 to 60%, which is still absolutely staggering, and yes, it is terrifying. As of right now, as of I believe April 2019, it is estimated that there is 7.7 billion people on this planet. That is a lot of friggin' people. Like, a lot. It's a number that you really can't fathom. You can't picture everyone together. And then when you start looking at these numbers and you start comparing them, it does get a bit scary. If you have 7.7 billion people on the planet, and let's just split the difference on the infection rate, and 40% of them become infected, that means that 3.08 billion people will contract COVID-19 during its life cycle. If our mortality rate is even 1%, the lowest of the percentages that we have examined at this point, that means that roughly 30.8 million people will die from COVID-19. If we take the number issued by the World Health Organization director, that's 3.4%. With that number, it would mean that 104 million people worldwide would die from COVID-19. Now, I would like to reiterate that these projections were based off of the state of the world at the time when it was done and the infection rate as it was spreading. Because we have taken preventative measures as a race, not just as a country, a state, or a city, this number is going to be reduced significantly, which is the reason that it is being done. Part of the reason I wanted to make this video is because I believe that people are viewing the fact that we're doing things to prevent this from happening as an inconvenience to their day-to-day, because they sincerely don't think that this is that big of a deal. But when you look at the projections and you look at the way things have happened so far and the path that we are on, it absolutely is. Just because the preventative measures are substantially easier to take than people would expect from a global pandemic doesn't mean that you should underestimate the absolute necessity that they be taken. So let's end this thing on some things that you can do to prevent yourself from catching this, or at least reduce your risk of catching and or spreading COVID-19. And these are 5 easy things that I believe everyone has been recommended to do. And if you haven't heard these yet, I'm sincerely happy you're watching this video right now. The first is social distancing, which just means that if you are in a social environment, please try and keep a minimum of 3 feet between you and any other human being. A good rule of thumb is to just hold out your arms, and if you touch anyone, tell them back the fuck up. Honestly, this makes things a bit awkward, but that really does help narrow things down to limit the amount of face-to-face interaction you are having with other individuals. And anyone who works in corporate America should finally follow the rule that those fucking meetings could actually be an email and stop forcing people to go and see people face-to-face to pretend like you have work to do. Second, wash your damn hands. This is something everyone should have been doing anyways, and if you have been doing it anyways, wash them more frequently and be more diligent about how long you're washing your hands and the frequency with which you wash them. For the folks who haven't been washing your hands, y'all are fucking nasty and you spread disease. Pick up this good habit and save someone's life, most likely your own. The third one is don't touch your face. This one is hard to do. I get it. I rest my head on my hands all the time. I'm constantly touching my face in ways that I don't even realize. Now, this isn't World Health Organization approved, but I recommend to make you realize how frequently you touch your face. And I know that supplies are limited here, but if you can do this, I highly recommend getting 240s and duct tape and taping the 240s to your hands, and each time you would go to reach to touch your face, instead drink from one of those bottles. At some point, you'll just forget while you were trying to touch your face and eventually pass out. The fourth is to cough into your elbow. I think we've mostly all been told to sneeze into your elbow, and for those of you who are younger, this would equate to dabbing. But it's just a way that you can prevent things that are airborne from being spread. In addition to that, you don't want to sneeze or cough into your hands because you'll almost immediately afterwards touch something. And even if it's a tissue to wipe your hands off, if you're not washing your hands, you're still spreading something. In fact, you have to touch your faucet anyways to turn it on, and you're going to touch that every time you wash your hands. So just go with your elbow. It's the easiest decision to make. And the fifth and most important thing you can do to prevent yourself from catching COVID-19 or spreading it to someone else is to just stay the fuck home. If you don't feel well, stay home. If you think you don't feel well, stay home. If someone in your family or your household does not feel well, stay home. If someone at work doesn't feel well, send them home. If you don't have the power, tell their boss to send them home. And if that doesn't work, tell them you are going home because you will not put yourself at risk. Now, I understand that it is easier said than done, but most importantly, no one wants to wind up as on the news as the boss who's keeping people at work who could potentially be sick during a global pandemic. I'm not saying you have to threaten them with that, but if they were to actually understand the risk they're putting people at, I don't think that they would take that chance, and most folks at this point are not. So just stay home. And I think that's part of the reason I really wanted to make this video is because I know there's a lot of fear out there regarding COVID-19, but there also seems to be some fear and paranoia regarding government lockdowns, states or even countries being put on lockdown, being placed into quarantine, being told to stay home for 14 days. And what that really comes down to is you need to imagine why they're making that decision. It's because there are grown-ass adults in this world who, while they are sick and potentially have COVID-19, won't stay in their house. They are going out despite knowing that it is infectious and possibly deadly, and they have to have the government tell them, just stay home. You can make this decision without the government telling you that. And what it really comes down to is if you're sick, afraid of being sick, or you think someone in your life is sick, just stay home. If you need to be hospitalized, that is the place you should go. Not work, not the game store, not the arcade, not out to do something that you would do any other day. Just stay home. It is not like any other day. Things are different right now. And eventually we can get back to normal. But if your basic choices endanger someone else's life, you're an asshole. And that segues wonderfully into the last thing I am going to cover, which is things that will not help you no matter what you do or how hard you try to prevent the spread of COVID-19 or to prevent you from catching it. The first thing that will not help you prevent COVID-19 from spreading or being caught is a lifetime supply of toilet paper. Stop buying it, stop hoarding it. I get that everyone needs to wipe their ass, but you don't need to freak out like it's somehow going to prevent you from catching a disease. And if you're thinking about using all your rolls to build a fort, couches, lamps, bedposts, these all work better than toilet paper rolls, okay? It is a bit ridiculous that this is happening in the States, and I understand that everywhere has their panic, and you're worried that you're going to run out of bare essentials or basic things, but just stop buying so much fucking toilet paper. Take what you need for a possible 2 weeks, and if you need more later, figure it out. You can buy twice as much as you normally would, which is what we did to make sure we're stocked up, but you don't need to buy a lifetime supply. I saw a meme today that said there are kids in 2060 who will still be wiping their ass with the toilet paper grandma and grandpa bought in 2020. That is just a bit too much. And more importantly, there are other people who might need it. And if you're hoarding it and they can't get it, you're an asshole. It is honestly very amusing to me that these folks are buying up so much toilet paper as if they need to wipe their butt when their head is clearly very buried up their ass already. The second thing that will not help you prevent COVID-19 is, just in general, being an asshole. Stealing things out of people's carts, snatching things from people's hands, stockpiling things that other people may need, refusing to help and do the basic decent things that a normal human being would do. None of that is going to help. And this isn't something new that exists in our world. It is just being highlighted how bad things are when people behave that way. So as a general rule, just don't be a jerk for absolutely no reason. I understand people are scared and you want to take care of you and your family, but that doesn't mean you need to endanger someone else's or treat someone like shit. This isn't the fucking purge, people. It's just a pandemic. And if this was the purge, the people who behave like that are going to be at the top of everyone's lists, okay? So just mind your P's and Q's and stop being a douchebag. And the last thing that is not going to help in this situation, and the most important one I think for you folks to think about, is panicking. Look, prepare for the things you can prepare for, and the things you can't prepare for, stop panicking about. They are going to happen regardless of any action you take. If there are actions for you to take, absolutely take them in a calm, rational manner. Make informed, reasonable decisions. You don't want to make decisions based out of fear. Accept the fact that there's certain things you can deal with and there's certain things that are beyond your control. And that is a general rule of life, even when there's not a pandemic. Don't let fear control your fate. This is something where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It is a cliche for a very specific reason, because it is true. Prevent as much as you can and don't worry about the rest. Isolate yourself if you need to, and don't worry about what's happening outside. You don't need to be involved in someone else's business just because you've always been nosy. We all have those neighbors that want to know what's going on with someone else's life. And if they don't know for 14 days, hey, that's just going to help everyone. If you're trying to figure out what's going on behind closed doors, mind your own business. Stay informed about what's happening. Be cautious about your exposure, and just be good to each other. Those are basic rules of day-to-day life. They're just more important now than they've ever been before. And I sincerely, sincerely hope that this video has brought new information to anyone who did not know it, or just reinforced that yes, it is serious, but yes, we can deal with it if we all deal with it together. And lastly, for whoever out there needs to hear this right now, everything is going to be okay. It sincerely is. Even when you don't know how and don't know when, everything is going to be okay. And I think that is something that a lot of folks, especially grown-ups, especially people who don't have their parents either nearby or with us anymore, really need to hear. Everything is going to be okay. And it is perfectly reasonable to be scared. This is a scary thing. This is why I'm making this video in the first place. I have my mom that lives with me that can tell me everything is going to be okay. And in recent days, I've been the one saying it to her, and I'm glad that I can say it back because she is at high risk, and she is someone who can be afraid and not be irrational about it. But everything is going to be okay. Be kind to each other. Take care of each other. Now, I don't know if I'm going to have another video that informs anyone about anything like this. I hope within a year I can look back and say like, man, I can't believe I had to make a video about something like that. Can you believe that happened? But who knows? I don't intend to, but if there's demand for additional information, I'm more than happy to bring it to you. But that said, this is the end of this video. So I want to just let you folks know to keep on creeping on, and we'll see you next week. You know the thing that pisses me off the most about this whole fucking thing is every men's room I've ever been into in my entire life, regardless of how many stalls there is, there's always at least one stall where someone has decided they're going to go in there and take a massive fucking shit and not flush it. Just leave it floating for the next person, because adult men, and probably teenagers as well, are absolutely fucking disgusting. And it's like a deliberate choice. You look at a toilet and say, I'm not going to flush that. And I love the fact that everyone right now has the ability to not touch a toilet to flush it, because they're the auto flushes. And the same thing with paper towel dispensers and soap dispensers and water and sinks. But it's just another excuse that people use, like, well, the toilet didn't flush on its own, so I'm not flushing my own shit. And they walk out. It's like those are the same fucking people who are hoarding toilet paper as if they knew how to use it in the first place. If you don't know how to flush a toilet, you don't know how to wipe your ass. And it is infuriating when I see people with garages just full of toilet paper and hand sanitizer, because you know it's those same fucking people. Hopefully they come to their goddamn senses. Seriously.